Whoa, 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 whoa! What's this? A scripted video. Zodiac must be finally reviewing something again! Hey, so don't go and harass the creator of this video. I don't condone harassment and that sort of stuff. This video is meant to critique, and all my humor is meant to entertain, not to bully. So yeah, don't be not cool, y'all. So if any of you nerds have perused my channel, you might remember that I once did a video where I analyzed the story of a character named Leo, whose story was laid out to me in an animatic format. While people could see that video as a bandwagoning on the creator of at the time, which that wouldn't be entirely wrong, I actually used to always say that if everyone did this sort of animatic backstory thing, I'd probably try doing the same thing to those, because I find these types of videos significantly easier to do, and honestly a little more fun than endlessly reading a character's bio, because I'm not really a big reader, to be honest. Well everyone, say hello to Skee-Ball X. This kid actually made an animatic backstory for their kid and actually asked me if I'd be interested in analyzing it. So here I am to do just that. Without further ado, let's analyze the story of Nick. Links to the original in the description, go check it out.
This is Nick. He is the main character of a story I made called Known But Unknown. He is the hybrid of a Maine Coon Anthro and a slime girl.
Okay, this isn't really a critique on the story itself, but just a note for the creator. Please amplify the sound of the video in the future. When I was watching this the first time to script this video, I had to turn my iPad all the way up and I could still barely hear the text-to-speech, so please fix that in the future. I'm gonna be amplifying it in this video so the lovely audience can hear it, but please in the future just amplify that a little bit. It should be significantly easier, especially if you're using text-to-speech, so please do that. Please, it makes it so much easier. Now from here I'm gonna skip just a little bit because it's talking about things not extremely relevant to the story, so if you really want to hear what the little fun facts that were mentioned in this part of the video, go watch the original if you're interested in that.
Of his backstory we will have to start with this guy. This is Ricardo. He's not one of Nick's parents, but he's important. Ricardo is a romantic. He never found love and never wanted to, but more than anything he wanted a daughter. He had very little money and didn't want to adopt. So after 10 months of working he created a girl out of slime. A good-hearted slime girl that he named Nicole.
Wait, so Ricardo didn't have a lot of money, so he didn't want to adopt, yet he somehow had enough money to basically make a slime girl all Powerpuff Girl style? I don't know how making an entire conscious entity works in this world, whether it's by science or magic, but something here just doesn't sit right with me. How can you not have enough money to adopt a child, but enough to play Dr. Frankenstein? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, honestly. I feel like this either needs some more explanation or some rewording, because as it stands, I'm rather confused with the logic here. I mean, I don't know, maybe a slime girl is easier to raise than a regular kid, but even then I don't see how Ricardo went from, I don't have enough money to adopt a child, to, let's play God!
Ricardo never let Nicole outside because he feared she would get made fun of or worse. Nicole was tired of staying in his tiny lab, and one day they got into an argument and Nicole escaped through her window. Once outside, the first person she saw was a light grey cat anthro similar to her age named Adam. She knew anthros had existed but never had seen one in real life, so this cat guy intrigued her.
Nicole, didn't your apparently poor mad scientist dad ever teach you not to talk to strangers?
She approached him and asked what was in his mouth. He was caught a little off guard. He had never seen a slime girl before, but he thought she was extremely beautiful. He went silent and eventually realized he hadn't answered her. He responded and they started talking. They talked for a while and Nicole ended bringing up she had escaped. She had nowhere to go and Adam asked if she would want to stay with him and his sister for a while.
Okay, so I know this is random, but I feel like Ricardo would have noticed by now that his only daughter was missing. Spoilers ahead, but Ricardo never gets brought back up again in the story, and I don't know why, but I almost feel like he just kind of disappears. Like, his purpose in the story was left almost unfinished. I'll bring this up at the end of the video, so just keep this in mind.
Nicole agreed and started to stay with him, and a month later they confessed they were in love with each other. After time, they married, and 13 months after they decided to see if it was possible for them to have a child. To them was born a son, who they named Nick, after his mother, and made his middle name, Adam, after his father.
Okay, hold up. So you mentioned that at first they weren't even sure if they could have a child, and then immediately jump ahead to that, oh, they were successful. Now, I get that this is a fantasy world if that wasn't evident enough already, but this doesn't really make any sense to me. I'm not even talking about how Nicole is a slime girl and Adam is an anthro, yeah. I'm more talking about how Nicole was artificially created. While I have no clue how she was made, it still just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, unless Ricardo went the whole 9 yards and gave her the whole package. Damn it, Ricardo. I don't think you need to go into all the specific details, but a little reasoning to how this was even possible would be nice. Did Nicole give a little bit of herself up to do this? Was Ricardo that committed to making a daughter? Did they consult a witch to do it, who in turn got the soul of their second-born child? Actually, now that I think about it.
Nick grew up as a pretty nice and social kid. He was responsible and hated people fighting. But, in this world lives Anthris, shapeshifters, hybrids, and humans. Anthris, shapeshifters and hybrids are popularly called ashes for short. One day, the Queen expressed her fears that the ashes could become feral and violent like real wild animals and labeled them as dangerous. People started to agree with her, and fear them as well.
Okay, so this is less of a criticism of the story, but more a criticism for the creator. I think you would have been better served putting this at the beginning of the video. I think giving a little more information about the world and how they have a queen and about the ashes and stuff would have been a little more helpful at the beginning, because now I'm a little confused about the setting and what kind of world this is supposed to be. But maybe that's just me, and this isn't really a critique of the actual story itself, which I'm pretty chill with so far.
This worried all the ashes, especially Nick. He hated to see people against each other and decided to try and fix it. He started being extra nice to his human classmates, and humans in general. One day he decided to bring some cat treats for his class. Most humans in his class knew he was just trying to be nice and that he didn't know that humans didn't like cat treats, but one kid didn't know they were cat treats. This kid was in an upper class and, unknowing that these were cat treats, ate one and immediately started to throw up at the taste.
You done goofed, random kid! To be honest, I'm wondering why no one else told him that they were cat treats. Either Nick gave him these treats in a way where the other kids who were around and knew that they were cat treats couldn't warn the kid, or this kid was such an asshole that no one really felt the need to warn him. I'll accept either of these answers as pavement, to be honest.
He believed he was poison, and when he found it was Nick, he attacked. This attack-on resulted in Nick's eye being scratched out, resulting in his eye going blind, and later his parents took him out of school. Even with this vision impairment, Nick did his best to stay happy and treat humans with kindness, but it didn't last long before he started to slowly hate the majority. More and more people were siding with the Queen. This started to degrade Nick. His happy personality started to diminish down. His parents tried everything and decided he needed something, or someone to take his mind off of it.
I actually really like the character development here, to be honest. I like how instead of flipping on a dime, Nick continues to try to be nice to people, but as time goes on, he slowly becomes more and more bitter. I think it's a rather believable sort of transition of a nice guy slowly being defeated by the world who won't return his kindness. I definitely like the sort of character arc going on here, and I think it could definitely be something very interesting and sad, you know?
They decided to have another child, and to them was born a daughter, but something was wrong. She was extremely small, the smallest anthro they'd ever seen. Nicole guessed it was a defect because she herself was artificial.
See, so Nicole is artificial. I was right, so how can they have a—
Later they realized more things. Jello could levitate herself and fly around as she pleased. Nicole and Adam never knew why. Her eyes would also glow red when she was angry, but no one really ever took her seriously because of how tiny she was.
Wait, Wait, what? Okay, so the whole being tiny thing was good and I could see it working. In fact, I was and still am going to use her size for a suggestion at the end for Nicole, but where the actual hell did this come from? Actual hell? Okay, so I could have forgiven the whole artificial slime girl, cat boy having a child thing if that was the only thing that there was, but whew, this I really can't forgive so easily. I'd like to hope that you had plans for this. Granted, I can't think of anything beyond she's possessed by a demon, but regardless, I will give you the benefit of the doubt that you do have something in mind for how this is possible. However, this really isn't something I can believe. Explanation or not, I really don't like that she can just randomly float and her eyes can glow red. It's just kind of ridiculous and it doesn't really make any sense to me. This is one of those things that even if you plan to explain it, it's not just something I can just brush off and accept until said explanation, you know? I'll discuss this more at the end of the video, but for right now, all I can say is I sadly just don't like this part of the story. It's just way too out in left field for me.
Despite Jello's fiery personality, she did cheer up Nick a little. But this also didn't last long, because finally the humans snapped and began the war. Nick, Nicole, and Jello wanted to escape and hide away, but Adam wanted to fight back, and he was doing fine until he was shot in the arm and felt no movement. Nicole ran over to him and tried to convince him to leave with Nick and Jello, but
okay, this whole segment confuses me a little bit. I've watched it about 3 times, and this is what I get from it. Adam wanted to stay back and fight in this war, and well, at some point at fighting, he got shot. That part I get. But then Nicole just randomly runs up to him during this fight? Was she and her children just standing in the background the whole time during a gruesome battle, or did Adam stumble home and that's when Nicole found him? I think this might just be a matter of poor wording, but the whole staging of this scene in my head is super confusing. I think this segment could have used a lot more explanation because I'm really confused about who was where and what kind of war Adam was going to fight in dressed in a t-shirt. And now, the part where it all went silent and stuff. I think you were going for some kind of dramatic and mysterious, ooh, something bad happened, but it's a little unclear. Did Nicole and Adam die? Was there an explosion? Were they captured? You'll hear later that it's clarified that they did in fact die, but my point is that I didn't get the memo from this scene. The message is just really unclear, which, again, I think is more of a matter of the video itself and not so much the story. I will say that the actual story itself, at least what I can get of it, is okay during this bit. But again, the way the scene was described is a little unclear for me.
Nick took Joe and started to run. He ran until his lungs started to hurt and decided to hide behind a building. He tired himself out and eventually fell asleep with Jello beside him. He was suddenly woken up by the voice of a girl whose name is Rosa. He realized this was a human. His heart started to race. She reassured him that she meant no harm. She told him that she wanted to keep surviving ashes in her house, and she asked Nick if he would want to come with her, and after some contemplation, he agreed. This was mostly because of Jello. They both had just lost their parents, and now she could never go outside again, but he wanted Jello to have a chance at some kind of life.
Honestly, I doubt with her apparent demon powers she'd ever have a normal life in the first place. Alright, potshots aside, I'm glad that Nick does have some kind of motivation to go with Rosa. Although I will say I feel like Nick could have had a stronger reaction to his parents dying. Maybe it just wasn't described, but I feel like he might have been more aggressive towards Rosa, or a lot sadder at the very least when she found him. Who knows, maybe he snaps at her, refusing her help before realizing that he and Jello really don't have any other options without their parents. I don't know. Slight nitpick, but I wish I could have seen more emotion from him about his parents dying.
Most of the time Nick would spend on one of Rosa's computers looking at art and reading, and Jello would play on Nick's phone. Rosa would spend most of her time looking in abandoned places, caves, and spots that were usually unoccupied for more ashes and would rarely succeed. Occasionally Nick would come across news articles about the victory of the humans and how excited they were to have killed off his kind. Nick would be sickened by these things.
To be honest, I'm not sure that 60%, like it says in the newspaper, really counts as killing off someone's kind, but well, whatever. I'm going to bring up a point I was refraining to comment on, but now I feel like I must. So this whole time, all these characters have been wearing seemingly plain and modern clothing, t-shirts, plain, short dresses, etc. But the queen here keeps being portrayed in a gosh darn old-timey gown. Trust me, I'm not one to complain about seemingly inconsistent time periods, but on this article it says this apparently happened in 2001, so why is the queen the only one dressed like she's in the 1800s? I'm fully aware this has nothing to do with the story, but I feel like this is something to consider. But like I said, it's nitpicky, you know.
The fact people were celebrating genocide. These things ruined Nick's personality and Rosa and Jello started to worry. This only made Rosa search more to find another Ash, but instead, she met another human who wanted to help her. This human was named Carrie, and she told Rosa that most of her friends and even her boyfriend were Ashes and told Rosa she wanted to help. Having someone else other than his sister and Rosa did help until Carrie started to shift her attention to Rosa, and they started to date.
Wait a second. Didn't you literally just say that Carrie had a boyfriend? Is that boyfriend dead and it just wasn't mentioned, or is Carrie a lot shadier than she appears? I'm on to you, Carrie. Other than that, odd inconsistency. I do like the idea of maybe Nick starting to finally get a friend before Carrie turns around and just starts spending more time with Rosa. It could definitely make an interesting little arc there, and in a way give Nick even more of a reason to be bitter about the world.
Rosa and Carrie started to search together, which doubled their chances, and one day they finally succeeded. Her name was Sarah, but she insisted on being called Scratch. She was a shapeshifter and could turn into a wolf. Most shapeshifters don't have animal traits in human form other than sharp teeth, but it seemed Scratch was somehow born with a tail. It didn't take long for Nick and Scratch to become friends, and they spent most of their time with each other. It also didn't take long for Nick to realize he had fallen in love.
And of course he did. I won't really comment on that part because I don't know enough about the two of them to know if this pairing makes sense or not, to be honest. So I have nothing against it at the moment. Alright, so that about ends the story itself. I would recommend watching the original video if you'd like to see the artwork for this character that was featured at the end, but as for my review, that's where I must stop. So despite the jokes and the nitpicks I've made, I personally think that this story is going in the right direction. For this just being a backstory, I think it definitely sets up an interesting world, and while it clearly has some kinks to work out, I still think it has a lot of potential. For my final thoughts, I'm going to focus on 3 things that I think could use the most improvement. Ricardo's character and an idea I had for him if you don't have any plans for him already, how an artificial slime girl and an anthropomorphic cat can have bibbies, and of course, Jello the demonic fairy. Okay, so let's talk about my boy Ricardo. So I've already talked about the whole not enough money to adopt but somehow enough money to play God thing, and I definitely think that could use some more thought. To be honest, I think you could play it out where he did have enough money to adopt a child, but something in his personality led him to instead want to use science to make a child that was more his own. Maybe he could even believe that adopting a child doesn't make them your child, therefore he didn't want to adopt a daughter. I think it could help you make Ricardo more interesting and help form a better explanation for why he chose not to adopt and instead play with science. Now, I did mention that I had an idea for Ricardo. I don't know if you had any other ideas for him in the story, but I'd like to propose an idea for you. So, I'm pretty sure if my daughter ran away, I'd go looking for her right away, and I'd be very heartbroken. Maybe because he couldn't tell the public he made a slime monster, he was unable to advertise her disappearance or report a missing person for fear of people knowing. Therefore, he'd end up looking for her on his own and in vain. Now picture this. While looking for surviving Ashes, Carrie and Rose come across a human that definitely doesn't look okay. He looked tired, worn out, and on the verge of going mad. Out of kindness, they brought this middle-aged, possibly homeless man back with them. They learn that this man has been looking for his daughter for years, and now because of the war, he thinks she's probably been killed, and it broke him. However, he keeps the details very vague, and despite thinking Nick and Jello look kind of familiar, he's too worn out and depressed to really figure out that these are actually his grandkids. I think it could make for a very interesting little story if executed properly. Even if you don't like that idea, I think there's a lot of potential for Ricardo, and I think you could definitely do some cool stuff with his character if you put your mind to it. Now let's talk about how Nicole and Adam can make babies. You confirmed in this backstory that Nicole is definitely artificial. I don't think you need to go super into detail about the couple's private life, but some explanation would be nice. Now, you certainly can play this off as a sort of leave it to your imagination kind of thing. However, I personally would at least put a little thought into it. But if you really don't think my suggestion is good and you can't think of anything, then this could be one of those things that you may be able to cheat around a little bit with. My suggestion, though, is that maybe after some experimenting, Adam and Nicole find that the only way for them to have kids is if she gives up a part of herself to make said child. You could express this in visuals even, like maybe because part of her mass was given up, she ends up getting shorter or something, you know? In fact, you could actually tie this into why Jello is so small. Maybe when making a second child, Nicole wasn't able to contribute as much of herself to that child as before, which made her very small because there wasn't much to work with. Again, you don't really need to take that suggestion. Like I said, it's not a very important and relevant fact for the story, so if you're careful, you could play it off as a use your imagination kind of thing. If you're careful, of course. And last but certainly not least, Jello. Okay, so I really don't know if you have an explanation for her ability to fly and her eyes, but even if you do, I do not like how this is executed. The way it's presented here makes it sound like the reasoning is, oh, Nicole was artificial, so whoops. Unlike my previous tangent, I don't see a good way to leave this to the imagination without people thinking it's bullshit. To be honest, unless her ability to fly is relevant to the story, I feel like it's not necessary. I don't always like telling people to just scrap things in stories because I believe anything can be executed properly in a story. But if this story isn't dependent on her weird demonic powers, then I think you'd be a lot better off without it. Honestly, I don't see why she can't just be small and maybe generally weaker because of how she was born. In fact, this might give Nick more incentive to want to protect her because she wouldn't be able to protect herself. You could even make her keep her personality the same. In fact, maybe her grumpiness and hot-headedness can spawn from a bitterness from being the way she is. It could make for an interesting character depending on how you work with it. I just think you need to reconsider letting Jello have her demonic powers. I just don't think it's necessary, and from what I've seen, the story can function just fine without it. Again, I do really think you can have something great here, and I just want to help you work out the kinks. Your story has potential, and I really hope you keep working at it. You seem to have some intention to make some more of these kinds of videos, so I hope you maybe found my criticism in this video helpful enough that you'll maybe consider throwing those my way. If not, well, I'm very happy that you had enough courage to send this my way to poke at it. Now I turn to the rest of you viewers. I encourage you to give some critique of your own to the creator. Remember, do not harass or flame anyone. I don't care if you agree with me or not. I'll beat you with a fire extinguisher if you start flaming anyone. But if you do have some nice critique to give to the creator, some advice on how to improve things, etc., please feel free to comment with it below, or maybe go to the original video and share some of it. Please do. I encourage it. But with that being said, make sure to check out their creator, give them some love, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one, whatever it may be. Zodiac, out.